Latex Slave Girl ran and waited patiently for her master and mistress to come and get her. She knelt on the cold stone floor of her dungeon, had bowed her arms behind her back, leather wrist cuffs held her wrists together, her arms stretched out behind her, forcing her small pert breasts to stick out. She was naked except for a tiny latex thong and her shiny black latex mask, which had holes for her eyes and mouth. Her long blonde hair stuck out in a ponytail through a hole in the top of her mask. After what seemed like an eternity, her master and mistress walked into the dungeon where Rhiannon was waiting for them. She felt her tight young pussy getting wet as she watched them walking towards her. Mistress Helen was dressed in a shiny black skin-tight latex catsuit, shiny black skin-tight latex stockings, a shiny black skin-tight latex mask with holes for eyes and mouth, shiny black latex gloves, and shiny black knee-high latex boots. Master Andrew had shiny black skin-tight latex shorts, matching vest, and a shiny black latex mask. "Good morning, Latex Sleuth," said Mistress Helen, pinching Rhiannon's nipple with her latex-covered fingers. Rhiannon screamed with the pain. "Good morning, mistress," said Rhiannon. "You haven't learned how to be a good latex slave girl yet," said Master Andrew, getting a bow gag from a small cupboard and gagging Rhiannon before helping her to her feet. He undid her wrist cuffles and helped her out of her latex thong. Then he helped her put on a shiny black skin-tight latex catsuit before laying her on a latex-covered bed, strapping her down. "You will learn how to be a good latex slave girl," said Mistress Helen, running her hands over Rhiannon's latex-clad body, teasing her. Rhiannon let out a muffled groan as Mistress Helen's latex-covered fingers rubbed against her latex-covered pussy, driving her crazy. There was nothing she could do to stop her. All she could was give in to the pleasure. Mistress Helen and Master Andrew walked out of the dungeon, locking the door behind them, leaving Rhiannon alone and unable to relieve the throbbing sensation in her latex-covered pussy. She tried to move about a bit, but she couldn't. She felt herself getting wet beneath the latex as she lay waiting for her mistress and master to return. The time passed so slowly it seemed as though time had stopped. She knew they were doing it to train her to be a good latex slave girl. Later that day, Mistress Helen and Master Andrew returned, dressed from head to toe in shiny black skin-tight latex. Mistress Helen took the gag out of Rhiannon's mouth before kissing her passionately for a brief moment. Then she pulled away. "You are a good latex slave girl," said Mistress Helen, unfastening the straps holding Rhiannon down and helping her off the latex bed. Then she fastened her wrists and ankles into leather cuffs attached to the dungeon wall by chains and fastened a spreader bar between her ankles, forcing her to keep her legs wide open. Rhiannon didn't make a sound as Mistress Helen proceeded to unzip her catsuit and put a metal clip on her swollen clitoris. Then she unzipped the zips over each of Rhiannon's pert breasts and put nipple clamps on her small hard nipples. Rhiannon bit her lip as the pain shot through her sensitive nipples. It was almost unbearable, yet she felt herself getting wet. Mistress Helen rubbed Rhiannon's swollen clitoris, making her moan softly. Then she stopped and got a whip from a hook on the dungeon wall and began whipping Rhiannon's pussy and her latex-covered legs hard. "What do you say, slave?" said Mistress Helen. "Thank you, Mistress Rhiannon," as Mistress Helen stopped her punishment. "Good slave, now you will serve your master," said Mistress Helen, beckoning Master Andrew over. Her walked over, rubbing his latex-covered cock as he looked Rhiannon up and down, then removed the spreader bar between her legs and uncuffed her ankles, wrapping her legs around his waist. Master Andrew unzipped his latex catsuit between his legs, taking out his hard cock and slid it deep into Rhiannon's wet pussy, fucking her hard and deep. Rhiannon moaned with pleasure, pushing her pussy against his cock, making him go deeper inside her. Master Andrew fucked her harder and deeper until she exploded into orgasm, covering his cock with her juices. He pulled out, squirted his hot cum over her latex thighs, then uncuffed her wrists, making her kneel in front of him. Then he pushed his cock in her mouth and forced her to suck him clean. Then he pulled out of her mouth and zipped himself up. Mistress Helen helped Rhiannon back onto the latex bed and strapped her down. "You have done well, latex slave. We are pleased with you. We will leave you for the night," said Mistress Helen as she and Master Andrew walked out of the dungeon, locking the door behind them. Rhiannon had enjoyed her first session with Mistress Helen and Master Andrew, and she looked forward to further training sessions with them both. She loved being a latex slave girl. She lived to serve her mistress and master. It was her only purpose in life. She would obey their every command and wear whatever outfits they chose for her. She loved them both dearly and respected them. She knew she would have to wait until they needed her again, which could be any time of day. She worshipped her mistress and master. She was very submissive and loved to please them. As she lay on the latex bed, the smell of the latex drove her wild. She felt herself getting wet, her nipples sticking out beneath her latex. She ached for release, but she knew she would have to suffer. It was part of her training as a latex slave girl. She looked forward to finding out what her mistress and master had in mind for her next training session. She knew it had only just begun for her. That night, Rhiannon dreamed of serving her mistress and master. They were all in latex, and her mistress had her strapped to the latex bed while master Allenby forced her to suck his hard cock while a machine plunged a large dildo repeatedly in and out of her wet pussy, making her come over and over. She couldn't do anything about it. She was helpless, but she loved every minute. She would endure anything if it pleased her mistress and master. Even if it meant humiliation or even intense pain, she didn't care. It was all part of her training. To be a good latex slave girl, she had to be ready to serve her mistress and master in whatever way they desired, no matter how humiliating or painful it was. Rhiannon hoped that this would be a permanent arrangement with her mistress and master. She couldn't serve anyone else. They were her life now, and she didn't want to change it for all the money in the world. She was happy being their slave, and as far as she knew, they were happy being her mistress and master. Tomorrow she would do even better.